Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus taking my first look at a Planet X product and totally breaking any kind of release order as I skip up to their 6th release, Vulcun. This is the Space T-Rex to finish off their series of Fall of Cybertron-styled unofficial Dinobots, and the video game Grimlock to finally take the weight off the shoulders of his hamstrung and long-berated 2012 cousin. I would say it is to Vulcan's credit that, at a very quick glance, he doesn't look entirely special, but then you start to realize how much beef he actually has in his arms and legs. You look from the other side and see a fully realized robot with no missing surfaces. The backpack is a wonderful bit of engineering that we'll get to later. The real moment comes when you put Vulcan next to the 2012 Grimlock and see just how much was missing. Vulcan's legs are a victory, his arms are fully filled out, and his chest is reproportioned with his stomach now that it doesn't have to also be the topside surface of the dino mode. He looks simple and chunky with a somewhat awkward stance that part of me wishes was sleeker, while another part of me attributes to his game accuracy. Vulcan's got paint, but a majority of it is to pick out his reddy pink highlights. His gunmetal plastic is proper gunmetal plastic though, and his bronzy goldy mustardy parts are cast very flat, but far more saturated than the 2012 official version. And his head sculpt, it fattens out horizontally and looks aggressive, particularly with its light-piped optic swish all blazed up in crimson. That clear red plastic also fills out a lot of details on his chest, and tries like mad to catch light off of Vulcan's flanks with varying degrees of trying real hard. Speaking of translucent plastic, look at this delicious swathe of deep dark orange on his shield. This is no buckler, this is a giant defense mechanism, and pegged into its user side is a big-ass sword. These are ridiculous and gigantic accessories, just like in the game. Also just like in the game, and just like with Hasbro's Grimlock, Planet X's Kalis can plug into Vulcan's shoulders to fly him around for maybe one level too much of playing as Grimlock before getting to the really fun ending part of the game. Vulcan's got a ball-jointed head, and it's got a great range. And it doesn't look like it will, but like, look how much that he can do. He can't really look down due to his chin, but he can look up. He can turn from left to right. This is the motion where it actually starts to bang against these things a bit, but due to all this freedom, it's easy to get around them. His shoulders are very simple. They go forward and backward, and in that hinge lets them... Actually, there's two hinges, but this hinge primarily lets them go like that. You can double hinge them down a bit if you feel that'll help you. I've, over time, well, over the last week, found it doesn't really help all that much. He has a bicep swivel, which bangs into this pauldron, but the pauldron doesn't tab down there, it sort of soft locks, so it just gets out of the way, and it looks kind of natural while doing so. He's got this elbow joint, which bends super tightly, about that far, and then he's got another joint there to bend a bit farther. There's like a little detail in there and everything. I tend to treat that as like a dino joint, this like a robot joint, and then I use the two of them in tandem as is necessary. His wrists can swivel around, and the knuckle can open, and it doesn't really look all that natural when his hand is open like that, so I don't usually leave him like that unless he's about to grab something. He's got a straight-up, super simple waist joint, and it's great. And then over here you can see there's like this really specifically keyed cut to work with this particular geometry, like all the geometry here of that dino head. This backpack doesn't lock in so that when you twist his waist, it'll just, through gravity and force and friction, get out of the way while you're swiveling his waist. That does mean if you grab him by the backpack, this kind of stuff might happen. Or if you, like, hold the toy this way, the backpack might sag. And I'm not sure if I would have preferred this locking in and limiting the waist, or vice versa. I kinda like the solution that's happened here. And the only times where it frustrates me is when I'm holding the toy like this, and I'm like, well, is this my fault? I'm not sure. His hips are simple friction joints. There's no ratchets in his hips. And they just go forwards and backwards with there's a little bit of V stuff going on here, but not very much. They can go outwards about that far. The full Van Damme score, to bring that one back. Thigh swivels, as I mentioned. And then he's got two knee joints. He's got his main robot knee joint, which is right there. And then he also has this other joint, mostly from the transformation, but it lets you use the two of them to come up with a placement that aesthetically suits your tastes. I kind of like having his knees forward a bit, and then, you know, like that natural hero slope. The one bummer is when you're messing with his feet or his boots or his knees, this side, this tailpiece tabs in super well, and it's internally tabbed. This tailpiece is tabbed on the outside. You can see it right there. And it locks in real solidly. It feels good. It's also really easy to bump out because it's not locked in on this side. It's like a three-sided channel it goes into. For that kind of connection, that's way more solid than I thought it would be, having looked at it, but I wish there was a little thing out here just to cup it and hold it in more firmly so I stop banging it around when I'm grabbing him by his legs, which is my natural thing to do. His ankles, well, you know, we're gonna call them ankles. This chunk of the boot doesn't do anything. This thing looks like a heel support. It's nothing. Look, it like sucks in farther than this chunk here. But there is a hinged ball socket, so there's a hinge for this and then a ball socket for this. Lets you get some play in the robot boot. And it does help, like if you're trying to tilt his ankles for a wider stance. It's working, but I'm kind of confused, not only by this thing here, but by the hole there and the hole there. I don't know what those are for. And maybe that's just part of the construction, but they look like they're supposed to do something. It looks like this guy is supposed to have like a bigger thing to peg onto so he can stay standing on it solidly. You know what? If they're gonna do it, do it. If not, then he has giant holes that I'm never gonna see unless I'm like looking at him like this. But he feels good. He's dead solid. I didn't really hit him that hard, but I don't want to mess with those things. Alright, let's talk about this backpack. After shifting the robot chest and shoulders down, the backpack has a simple series of motions that also lets it tuck the entire T-Rex head in between the T-Rex chest panels. This is one of the first things that'll clue you in to how this toy is a triple-digit piece, as opposed to a $20-something 2012 mainstream toy that ran into a brand new budget crunch. Grimlock's arms turn into his space T-Rex legs, as they often do. The dino feet separate and reform rather than just sliding up or down, and the shoulders do a surprising amount of double-jointed motions to slim up and clean up. The robot legs are where everything gets crazy. Well, not really crazy, just kinda weird. They do a very simple curl-up gesture to form Grimlock's dino back and dino butt. However, his dino tail was split and folded up to fill in the backs of both of his boots, and now those halves have to squeeze past the rest of his body to get to the other side of the lower leg sections. One of them is pretty easy to get over there, but the other one almost invariably involves a bit of flex on its big mounting plank, even if you swivel things to give it the most clearance. Here's the thing though, Planet X has stated that the aforementioned planks are designed to be flexible and survive some minor bending. They're thick pieces, and in the week and a bit that I've been transforming this guy back and forth, they've never exhibited any kind of stressing or cracking. They feel like a plastic that's made to do this and cast thick enough that it seems like it's not going to be an issue. Now, we'll see how things go in a few months or even years from now, but I don't think there's anything to worry about in the immediate future. Now, this is where I really had my oh my moment with Vulcun. His dino mode is large, solid, imposing, and satisfying. It is the antithesis of the 2012 official Grimlock's dino mode. It looks menacing and does not visibly shrink like his generation's predecessor. The color work is mostly the same stuff we saw in robot mode. The placement of details is very close to the game, right down to a pair of adjustable rocket boosters right above Vulcun's posterior. Also, I meant to highlight just how lovely the translucent orange rings look on what are now his dino hips. They look like they've got silver paint behind them or something to add some shine. Vulcan's space T-Rex head has some hardcore optic shine, as there's a straight up open tunnel between the two eyes to allow light to reflect within. Guys, look at his head. It's wonderful. He has an insignia-shaped translucent patch on his nose. Don't hit him there, boy. Why you do that? His jaw is filled with legit pointy teeth and a twiddleable flamethrower tongue to boot. Sadly, Planet X didn't include any screw-hole covers this time around, so don't look at Vulcan's dino mode from its left side for too long. As for weapon storage, there's a peg hole on either dino hip, and that's about it. I wasn't expecting much else, but I'd hoped for something more integrated or surprising. Vulcan's T-Rex mode is categorically more posable than False Cybertron Grimlock's. He's a $125 toy, and that was a $20 toy made during a budget crunch. I hope he's better, or these guys screwed up. But he is better. His head has got an opening jaw. Opens wide. Like, check out how much he can fit in there. I'm not going to try to fill it myself, because I don't have enough. And then there is a twiddleable flamethrower tongue to boot. And that's neat. Also, those teeth hurt. As you can see, he's also able to look up and down for your different major T-Rex postures. You know, he can be a little bit more classic, or he can be a little bit more charging. And if you mess around with this, as you can see, it's easy for this panel to come loose. Sometimes it might be good just to hold on to that while doing this. That panel coming loose has to do with the placement of this double-jointed thing here. It's real tricky to get it just right. When it's just right, it locks. I'm not good at getting it just right. The head can also slide forward so that it can look left and right just a little bit, just enough to make a difference, and just enough to make me wish it could look even more in each direction. There's also a cut joint across the entire neck for Masterpiece Grimlock head swivel action, and his little teeny arms are able to swivel forwards and backwards. They can hinge outwards. Then they have a super tight elbow hinge that lets them borderline, like that's a double jointed curl right there. And then the top two fingers are one piece C-clipped into the forearm. It's a very stiff joint. It might not move on yours at first. Be careful with it, but you can get a bit of this going on. And that's always a good time. As for his dino legs, they are the robot arms. So they can go forwards and backwards at the now hip. They can go out about that far. So you can go about that far, and then if you take the pauldron and then untransform this a bit, you can go a little bit farther if you really need to get that hardcore canine urination posture going on. The bicep is now a thigh. This is what I would call the dino knee. This is what I call the robo knee. So now you've got a, well, robo elbow, dino. It's double jointed, pretty much. And I usually like to do this top one first, just because I think it looks a bit smoother. And then a new joint here is a third, I guess, somewhat digitigrade thing for the ankle. Usually I have it pointed forward because it just looks a bit nicer. His butt has got a pair of flaps that do that, and he can fart boosts out. He can let loose a nitrous rip and then fly forward and wreck your day. His tail, these joints, as you can see, they're not on the same level, so you can't really use them to get his tail to go up and down all that easily. It will move up and down, but not in any kind of real helpful way. However, it's got dedicated joints to go sideways. One joint here, one joint here, one joint here. And that's super cool. You can mix it up to get some S-curve going on if you prefer that. I just like how it looks fully swished one way or another. This is a fun T-Rex mode. It's just posable enough for me. If I could have had one more thing, it would have been ankle tilts. Like, the toes can do this, but that doesn't really help with anything. If they could go up a bit, that might help with some walking or running poses, but they're not very useful for that. I just wish I could have tilted his ankles a bit so I could get some wider, like, rear in your leg stances to be more solid. They are pretty solid, just on the ridges of the side of the feet. But damn, what a cool dino mode! I love this thing. Rawr! Vulcun is a surprisingly simple toy, all things considered. He gets a lot done without it being a pain to do, and by all accounts is the strongest Planet X release to date. I've only messed with 3 other ones, but Vulcan's certainly the most fun experience I've had with their wares myself. I suppose my only disappointments are a lack of surprise. He looks just like video game Grimlock right down to the awkward stance and lumbering postures. He has a sword and a shield. The tail transformation and subsequent posability is pretty badass, but the rest of the conversion is fairly predictable. There's rarely a majorly magic moment, other than the satisfying mass of the toy itself. But that's why I had to get my hands on this toy as soon as possible. This is the right hand of the ghost of Fall of Cybertron, slamming down on the table and reminding you all of the potential lost with the demise of High Moon's Transformers games. I'm not delusional, and I realize that the game's staff will not see a single penny for the sales of Planet X's Vulcan, but this still feels like a sort of resolution for the intensely flawed 2012 Grimlock toy. That toy struggled to represent something impressive at the worst time in recent memory for a Transformers toy to try and accomplish that. Vulcan delivers a definitive take on video game Grimlock, and feels like a final high note to end the saga of Matt Teeger's unrelenting, enthusiastic cries of Space T-Rex! Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and as the year of 2015 comes to a close, so too does the loop on Fall of Cybertron Grimlock. Planet X has one last dino trick up their sleeve, though, as they've got a 6th aquatic member on the way. So, are you a friend of paddles?